It's a big hello to all of our members, sponsors, and friends. You probably recognize we're doing something new and innovative. Just remember, who says you can't teach old dogs new tricks? Due to the coronavirus, closing of the HR facilities and your health, we announced that we are moving to the use of technology to ensure that we comply with the governor's mandates and ensure your health. Fear not, as soon as the HR facilities are reopened and we believe that it is safe, we will begin our normal monthly operations. In the interim, we request that you monitor your email boxes and go to our website for future announcements. As always, we endeavor to bring you a number of interesting speakers to educate and inform you on current and future events. With this in mind, we are proud to have with us today Senator John Cornyn, sometimes known as Big John, offices in Washington, D.C., where he continues to work diligently on our behalf. John would prefer to be with us here in person, but graciously accepted our invitation to be here via Zoom. As is our custom, Joan Van Fleet will introduce and pose a list of questions to Senator Cornyn. Joan?
I have the honor of introducing our highly distinguished speaker, our very own Senator John Cornyn. I will introduce him at this time, and after his address to our members and sponsors, I'll be asking a series of questions. Senator Cornyn is a born and bred Texan. He has honorably served the state as a district court judge in San Antonio, and then on our Supreme Court as Attorney General, and has been fighting for the conservative Texas values in the U.S. Senate since 2002. He is well respected by his Senate colleagues, who elected him Senate Minority Whip and subsequently Majority Whip when the Republicans won back the Senate in 2014. His leadership posts have put Texas at the front of the line to get things done for our state. Passing the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, helping families and businesses keep more of what they earn, authoring the Affordable Prescriptions for Patients Act, lowering the cost of prescription drugs by preventing pharmaceutical companies from gaming the patent system, leading the charge to confirm conservative judges across the nation, 190 nationally and 21 in Texas. Senator Cornyn was the chief defender of Justice Kavanaugh when the Democrats led their disgusting smear attack. He is being endorsed by the president, as well as Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Senator Cruz, and more than 2,000 other elected Texans, conservative community leaders, Republican women, and many, many more. He is a champion of getting more conservative judges confirmed, is fighting for legislation to lower prescription drug costs, led passage of the Debbie Smith Act to address rape kit backlogs. And when natural disasters strike our communities, including the coronavirus, there's been no stronger fighter for helping Texans recover and rebuild than Senator Cornyn. Senator Cornyn, we had hoped to welcome you to our clubhouse at Heritage Ranch in Fairview. However, with the onset of the coronavirus, this has become impossible. Nevertheless, we are very pleased to welcome you right now into our living rooms with the hope of seeing you in person whenever the time should arrive. And now a very big, warm welcome to Senator John Cornyn.
Well, thank you very much, Joan, for that nice introduction. Ted, thank you for your leadership of this important and very large club in Collin County. I had a chance this last month to introduce a friend of mine, John Ratcliffe, up here in Washington to be the new director of national intelligence. And so we've been busy despite the mitigation efforts that we are all participating in, along with our own actions to take our responsibility to defeat this virus. But it's nice to be back in the Capitol working like so many Americans, so many Texans are, whether they be grocery clerks or nurses and doctors treating patients at the hospital or law enforcement. I think it's important that we all are able to show up and do our job safely and effectively. I'm sure you know that, but you all have some great officials there who are a strong voice for our Texas values in Washington, D.C., and are part of what I like to call Team Texas. People like Van Taylor, for example, and of course in Austin, Angela Paxton and Candy Noble represent you well, not to mention Justin Holland, Matt Shaheen, Jeff Leach, and Scott Sanford, and Pat Fallon. I was in Collin County just this last February to speak to the Lincoln Reagan dinner and heard that if you want to get elected as a Republican in Collin County, you have to go through Heritage Ranch. And like Joan said, I wish I could be there with you in person, but coronavirus has turned traditional campaigning on its head. And like you, this last couple of months, I've Zoomed, Skyped, live streamed, WebExed like never before. It's really quite remarkable how many people you can talk to and see. And we've tried to make it as productive as possible, but mainly for me, it's been to listen to how the extraordinary pieces of legislation that we've had to pass in Washington, D.C. have impacted the lives of ordinary Texans in terms of their health, in terms of their jobs, and it's been enormously helpful. But necessarily, traditional campaigning has been put on hold, and we know that it's important to bring those efforts online, and we've done exactly that. That's something all of you can continue to help us with if you haven't already. My campaign holds weekly online training to teach volunteers to use a computer program that calls eligible voters and directly mails them a voter registration card. The training only takes 30 minutes and you can volunteer at your convenience. So if this is something that you'd like to do, we would love to have you join us. The online system also protects your personal information and is easy to use. But we all know that the seeds we're sowing now will bear fruit in November for Republicans from the White House down to the courthouse. When I was last on the ballot in 2014, we had 4.7 million voters. In Ted's race last cycle against Robert Francis O'Rourke, that 4.8 million became 8.3 million. And this year we're projecting more than 11 million people will vote in the general election. We learned a lot from what happened last cycle, and we have made appropriate adjustments, and we are not going to cede any ground. While we hear how every election is the most important in our lives, I really think this one, in fact, may be. There's no question that the coronavirus pandemic has changed our world. And as I said, I've been laser focused on helping, along with my colleagues like Ted Cruz, to pass legislation that sends critical resources to our healthcare workers, our first responders, and others on the front line. We've tried to also throw a lifeline to small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program that many of you are already familiar with. And this is the difference between a mom and pop restaurant laying off its small team of servers and those employees being able to continue to draw a paycheck so they can put food on the table for their own families. Amidst what has by and large been a bipartisan consensus, we know that when we ran out of those funds, the money that was put in there was depleted in 2 weeks. That's when Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer couldn't resist using this as a bargaining chip to try to get other things unrelated to the coronavirus in the bill. So instead of quickly acting to replenish this fund and support the millions of people who desperately needed the help, they did what unfortunately they almost always do. They used it to block funding and ignoring calls from even their fellow Democrats to to stop the political games, at least during an emergency like this. But eventually we fought back and won. And of course, more businesses are open today because of that. But this is not over, and we have to remain on a war footing. Just today in Washington, D.C., after having been gone 2 weeks, after an 1,800-page, $3 trillion bill was introduced by Nancy Pelosi without even consulting Republicans, they are voting to pass that bill today. I will tell you that we are not going to take the bait. We do believe we ought to continue to work together to try to solve the real problems that exist when it comes to the public health and our economy. But we don't believe that we should just spend more borrowed money if we can help it. And we want to make sure that the money we do spend is meeting the real needs out there. I know that people want to know, well, what are you going to do next? We're not going to pass that $3 trillion Pelosi bill, but we are going to include things like liability protection for businesses that begin to reopen. We know that people who in good faith follow public health and government guidelines should be protected from opportunistic litigation or nuisance lawsuits that may make the difference between their ability to survive or not. And we know our hospitals, our universities, and other businesses and nonprofits need this sort of assurance. The new reality is we must learn to live in a world where the coronavirus is present while we ultimately get a cure and then a vaccine. In the meantime, we need to make sure that these opportunistic lawsuits aren't discouraging or deterring our progress forward. I've been working, of course, as you would expect, with Governor Abbott and President Trump to respond to this crisis. I, like everybody else, am aching to get back to normal, but we shouldn't expect that to happen immediately. And normal will likely become something like the new normal. But I support Governor Abbott's cautious and measured approach to reopening our state. Dr. Birx, who has become a mainstay on our TV sets almost every night at the Coronavirus Task Force press conferences, she approved the Texas plan as one that brings together our policymakers, local leaders, businesses, and public health officials. Well, as our economic gears begin to churn once again, we need to think about who we trust to regrow our economy after we come out on the other side. Will it be Joe Biden, who said he'll ban fracking, he'll appoint Robert Francis O'Rourke to be his gun czar? And of course, the Democrats that are running against me for the Senate call the Green New Deal aspirational and took the first opportunity they had last month to join AOC in bashing our energy sector that provides about 40% of the energy needs for the rest of the country. Instead of blaming the Saudis and the Russians for creating an international energy crisis, a liberal chosen by Chuck Schumer running for my seat, MJ Hager, blamed Texas oil companies for this devastating downturns, showing that she's willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of Texas jobs for her own politics, not to mention our country's energy independence and influence abroad. I'm sure I'm not the only one who believes that real leaders don't resort to kicking them while they're down, and they certainly don't celebrate the loss of good American jobs. I think the American people, and certainly Texans, are going to remember who fought for them during this time of uncertainty, who checked in with them, asked what they needed, listened, and then delivered relief. Our pre-coronavirus economy didn't happen by accident. It was a result of years of conservative policies that encourage entrepreneurship, innovation, and job creation. Heaven forbid, if the Democrats win in November, America won't regrow. It will become unrecognizable. We'll have liberal judges and Supreme Court justices who return to legislating from the bench, people we can't even vote for. We'll see Medicare for all, or as I like to call it, Medicare for none, because it will be bankrupt. We'll see a repeal of the tax cuts that we passed that let hardworking Texans keep more of what they earn. And of course, we'll see open borders and an energy policy that will bankrupt our state. All of this is to say, what we do come November in terms of our elections is vitally important. Now, the Dallas Morning News called me one of President Trump's fiercest defenders, which I think is supposed to be an insult coming from them. Don Jr. called me one of the president's biggest allies, and I like that. And I think I have been an ally trying to help the president succeed because I want America to succeed. Without question, I support the president, and I'm very happy to have his endorsement for my reelection. I trust President Trump to rebuild our economy, but he can't do it alone. Republicans have a razor-thin majority in the Senate, and unless we retake the House, Senate Republicans are the only firewall between small government and the tide of socialism that's become so popular in the Democratic Party. We know that Hollywood liberals and Chuck Schumer's Northeast billionaires are pouring millions of dollars into turning Texas blue. They were very encouraged by how close they got in 2018. The momentum we garner for my race and the president's race will set an important tone for the other Republicans running up and down the ballot. People like Candy. State Democrats are only 9 seats away from taking the House, and if we lose just one seat in the Senate, Democrats will be able to block important policies pushed by our great governor and lieutenant governor. So it's time to get started or restarted. This group is very important because Republicans in Collin County tend to set the pace for the rest of our state. We need you to make hay in your communities. We need our party to unite this election year, because there's no question that Democrats are 100% united and inflicted with Trump derangement syndrome. Both sides are motivated to win, and motivation is very important in terms of turnout. And Texas remains the biggest prize. So thank you all for everything you do to advance the conservative cause and for helping Republicans win and win big in November. Joan, Ted, I'm happy to answer some questions.
Fine. We have a group, a small group of 4 questions trying to hit upon different aspects of or concerns, shall I say, that we're facing as a country. The first one, it is clear that Americans do not wish to be held hostage to China. How would you propose to bring all of our essential industries back to the USA, or to relocate them to other friendly, trustworthy countries? What can we do about this situation?
This is one of the most important lessons I think we can learn from this virus. Obviously, China was the source of the virus. They sat on the information while it spread around the world, and while they hoarded personal protective equipment that then was not readily available to other countries and other people. But we've learned that our supply chains are simply vulnerable to China. Maybe they make things cheaper, but the truth is we can't depend on them, and we need to relocate those supply chains back to the United States. That's going to be one of the most important things we do, whether it's be medical equipment or pharmaceuticals or things like sophisticated semiconductors there's just been an announcement that the president has brought a Taiwanese semiconductor company that makes a unique set of specialized those semiconductors that are important to our economy and to our security back to the United States. So this is going to be one of the most significant changes, I think, in our relationship with China.
I think it's also ironic that President Trump, this has been his big concern even before the coronavirus, to bring business back to the USA. So thank you for the answer. The second question concerns the November elections, which we all regard as very significant, and as you said, among the most important elections in our lifetime. Looking forward to the November elections, should Texas expand the mail-in voting if the pandemic is still active? Explain your opinion.
Well, let me say first that I don't expect the virus to be in a pandemic mode by November. I think we're making progress every day, and I'm actually optimistic that that will not be the case. But our Democratic friends want to try to control all voting from Washington, D.C. And I think these decisions are best left up to the states. In Texas, as Attorney General Paxton pointed out in an op-ed that I read this morning in the San Antonio newspaper, mail-in ballots are a potential source of fraud and organized schemes to disenfranchise voters. Right now, we have a very friendly and accommodating system of mail-in ballots for people who qualify, and then early voting, where people can show up and vote at their leisure, and then, of course, election day voting. I worry about rushing to establish a new complex system and whether or not it would even be able to reveal the winner on election day, as we saw in Florida back in the Bush versus Gore election. We don't want to have a presidential election that isn't decided for perhaps weeks after election day, and that also is an opportunity for people who want to meddle with our election system to do so. So I believe that we've got the mix about right, a mix of mail-in balloting, early voting, and election day voting. Anybody who wants to cast a ballot, I believe, will be able to safely do so.
Thank you for that answer. The next question does also pertain to the election. And when I use the word we, I mean politicians as well as the voters, all of us. What, in your opinion, must we do to ensure that President Trump is reelected and that we keep the Senate and expand our position in the House? What are the key components here?
Well, Joan, I do believe President Trump will win, and I believe we'll retain our majority in the Senate. It's going to take a lot of hard work, but I think that's what the outcome will be. We need to regain the House and retire Nancy Pelosi, to be sure, so we can actually get some work done instead of the posturing that we see going on even today with a $3 trillion so-called stimulus package. We have one seat that I think is almost a given for us in the Senate, which is Alabama. That's a pickup for us. But then we're largely playing defense in places like Maine, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina. And we've got a lot of hard work between now and then. But we all know what we can do. We can contribute our money, we can contribute our time. And now, thanks to the miracle of modern technology, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You can help us register voters, and you can help us contact them and encourage them to vote for our candidates. So this is going to be a very contentious election. We know that the Democrats are united in their hatred for President Trump. Unfortunately for them, they have a nominee who inspires very little enthusiasm from their side. But that's why you see Joe Biden embracing a lot of the hard left policies that he's never advocated before, but he believes that's where the Democratic Party is, that's where I need to be. So I'm optimistic we'll win, but it's going to be a big fight.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And we'll do our best, you can be sure. Even in Collin County, that has always been very Republican. We don't want to give up an inch.
No,
We'd like to make sure that we do even better than we've ever done before. I have one more question, and this one pertains to the stimulus package that you have mentioned, but you might, you'll hear the question and you can expand upon it, because it is something that I know will take a lot of attention in the near future. The Democrats are proposing an additional $3 trillion stimulus package. How is the Senate going to address this issue, understanding that the Democrats are positioning it as a relief package for the poor and the blue-collar class? What in this legislation would you specifically support, and why? And what would you like to see in there that isn't?
Joan, the last 2 weeks, the Senate has been working in Washington, D.C., working on the next package. And Nancy Pelosi has adjourned the House. They haven't been meeting. And on Tuesday, she drops a 1,800-page bill without any consultation. It's a partisan bill. And then she's summoned the House back today and demanding they vote for it. And she runs a pretty tight ship, and Democrats kind of fall in line. And I'm confident they will pass it. But it is a ideological wish list and a grab bag of bad policy, and it's not going anywhere in the Senate. But the reason why I think we should be careful at this particular juncture is we've done some very big things. We've spent trillions of dollars already to try to throw a lifeline to individuals that don't have a paycheck, to try to bolster our small businesses and encourage employers to keep them on the payroll. And we've provided relief to the states and the cities and counties because they're seeing huge loss of sales tax revenue. And we've helped our hospitals, our frontline healthcare workers. We've done a lot. But the truth is, when you do anything that big and that fast, you're going to make mistakes. And it's not perfect, but we try to do our best. So we're looking and listening to constituents, I am across the state, and saying, you know, how are we doing? Are we hitting the right target? Do we mess up? Is there things we need to fix or tweak or eliminate or add? And so that's what I'm focused on right now. The truth is, we still have about $500 billion that hadn't made its way out the door in Washington from the previous legislation that we passed. So this is just purely posturing by Nancy Pelosi, something she's very good at. And unfortunately, the press doesn't hold her accountable. And she can just, they will just serve more or less as a propaganda tool to the Democratic Party. But the one thing I do want to mention that we will insist that has to be part of the next bill will be liability protection for our small businesses, our hospitals, our universities, our nonprofits, and others that begin to gradually and safely reopen. Because this can't be just a bonanza for opportunistic lawsuits that discourage people from following in good faith those public health and government guidelines. We need to provide them a safe harbor to prevent the trial lawyers from circling overhead like vultures and deterring our economic recovery. Again, what was so incredible about our economy before this virus hit us is we've never really seen anything like it before. It was a full employment economy. And then we've now been blindsided by this virus. But it's very important that we get up as quickly as we can and following the guidelines that Governor Abbott, Center for Disease Control, and others are prescribing, we begin to safely reopen. That's going to be absolutely critical to our recovery while we race for a cure and for a vaccine.
Thank you very much, Senator Cornyn. And I've come to the end of the questions. I believe Ted Puches wants to say a few words to you. But once again, I want to assure you that we would be most happy to see you in Fairview amongst us whenever you can get there.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to that in the future, and we'll do our best to make sure that you remain what you're doing right now and bring everybody else along with you. Thank you again.
Thank you,
and
Joe.
I wish you the very best. Thank you.
Cornyn, I'd like to thank you on behalf of our membership, our board of directors, and myself for taking time today during your work on our behalf in order to be able to spend some time with us to give our membership and our sponsors and our friends a flavor of what their senator is like. Unfortunately or fortunately, individuals get painted by the press, and sometimes it's just refreshing to be able to see the individuals who represent us and to acknowledge what they're doing for us. Furthermore, once the virus restrictions are lifted and it's safe, I'm giving you a personal invitation to join us in person here at the ranch. I think you'd enjoy Fairview. It's known as horse country. There are a lot of 3 and 5 acre lots here, and there are a lot of horse ranches. So to give you an idea, you could come up here and wear your boots and walk around a while and enjoy yourself, all right?
Sounds great.
But we wish you good luck in November, and you can be assured that the Republican Club at Heritage Ranch is behind you 100%, and we will continue to make sure that our conservative and Republican candidates are voted for into office this year. Thank you again for your time, and I wish you good luck.
Thank you. God bless all of you.
Same to you. Take care.